today. So really what I'll do with the agenda is I will kind of bore you to death a little bit with some slides. Hey, there's Ben. And then, we'll kind of run through what the project is, a brief kind of overview, the progress to date, because we did kick off and start this thing in mid-May, and we've been running pretty heavy and fast since then. Kind of talk about some of the expectations, maybe some of the challenges, and maybe what we will get, what we won't get out of the website, and how we might address that as well. And then I'll kind of give you all a sneak peek of where we're at right now, what it looks like, kind of wander through the website as it is in the testing mode. But we're really close to rolling this out to a lot of the testers, course directors, to start building out some classes and actually getting their hands in there and seeing what's going on, and hopefully really put it to the test and break it if possible, so we could develop around any of those bug fixes. So that's kind of the plan for the evening, but obviously this is a pretty small group. I love that. Feel free to jump in with any questions, interrupt along the way, because I'd love it to be conversational. And if this doesn't go the full hour, that's fine with me, but I'm here to help answer any questions along the way. So definitely chime in. With that, I will go ahead and kick it off. I'll pause along the way as well, so you can have a chance to jump in. Oops. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the screen. Really, we're referring to it as the new CMC.org. We kind of had talked about it in my last presentation at the leadership conference of the Mountaineers website. We had to rebrand it, the new website. We didn't really know what to call it. We talked about naming it something, but that kind of took away from, we really want to emphasize that this is CMC as a whole. So I'm trying to refer to it in my language and being conscious about it, that it is the new CMC.org. It's not that creative, but I think it sends a pretty good message on there. So again, kind of walk through the agenda, but I just want to emphasize, jump in with questions, interrupt. You're not necessarily stopping my train of thought or anything like that. And I'd love to have it more of a discussion than me just kind of speaking the whole time. So any and all welcome. If you do want to throw them in the chat, maybe Joe or somebody can kind of monitor that, because while I'm presenting, I won't be able to see that, and we can answer them as we go, if you don't mind.
Yeah, happy to help. I'll keep an eye on it for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So kind of a brief overview. I'm going to assume not everybody's exactly familiar with all the process that we've gone through to get to this point, why we chose this partnership and this website. So I'll run through that really quickly. Again, I'll pause for questions as well. But basically, if you spent any time on our current website, you've probably encountered something that's got you frustrated on it. It's really outdated. This website was rolled out without any stakeholder input, or at least without enough stakeholder input. So a lot of people, when this website originally rolled out, were kind of frustrated because it didn't, even from the get-go, it didn't meet the needs of our members. It didn't provide a really good member user experience on there. So, we've been talking about this partnership with the Mountaineers for the last 5-6 years. They've implemented a really robust product. We looked at it, we felt it fit our needs really well, and we were able to get into a really cool agreement that I'll talk about a little bit more. But the other thing with our current website is it's not supported anymore. So this was very highly customized. The one individual that was with the firm that had implemented it is no longer with that firm, but we contract with him for a few hours a month to help us maintain and keep the website up to date. But other than that, there is so much behind the scenes that is unknown to anybody other than this one individual. And so we've got a risk that we've been running for several years, that if that individual decides to walk away or no longer support us, we would have to spend a lot of money getting somebody else with the technical knowledge up to speed to help do anything to break fix the website. In addition to that, the current website, as I said, it wasn't able to meet our needs from the very beginning, but now even more so, it's unable to support our growth or the mission of the organization. There's a lot of information. If you all know, we do some reports out to different groups internally, trying to make business decisions essentially for the organization. Those reports are all done manually with a lot of effort and with inconsistent data across the board. So we're not really positioned well to kind of make decisions or navigate the changing times or support our members, support our groups with good information on activities across the board. So those are all things that will improve with the new website. And then, like I said, the member experience, The most recent one that's been extremely frustrating for members was if you were trying to renew your membership in the period of January, February, March, you may have encountered this, but you would go through all the renewal steps and get to the button where you'd submit your credit card information and the thing would just air out on you and no longer allow you to process. And it was hit or miss. We couldn't figure out, was it, if you used a different browser, it might work. If you logged in on a different day, it might work. And so it was really inconsistent in how it applied, but it was really frustrating. And so a lot of folks weren't able to renew even after several attempts. So we were able to get folks that would call in by phone, and our membership services team was able to support them and get them renewing. But that's just one example of a numerous amount of ways that this website is frustrating for our members and all of our users as a whole. And then I talked about the partnership with the Mountaineers. Again, they went ahead and they invested close to $1 million in this whole website platform. I know I've talked to other folks where they're saying, hey, we could design something like that for $15,000, for $10,000. And I think it comes from a place of not understanding the complexity of our organization. We've got not only, we're a not-for-profit, so we have donor management, we have member management, we have classes we offer, we have prerequisites for different trips or different courses and things like that. So there's a lot of complex database, or there's a really complex database behind what people see on the front end of the website. So that all needed to be taken into account. When we talk to the Mountaineers, they are basically the organization that is the closest to what we do across the United States. And they're very similar. We've got a really good relationship with them. So they allowed us to poke around and kind of ask a lot of questions and get in there. And it turns out that the website that they have and what they created is substantially better than what we have. And we feel it'll position us really well to grow the organization, but to support members and provide a fantastic member experience to our community. With that also, though, comes a lot of benefits. One is we're not going to invest $1 million in the website. We get it at kind of a smoking deal. So what a couple cost advantages we've had is we were able to license the code, we call it the base code, that the Mountaineers had developed. So all the changes, all the customizations, everything they needed to be able to process trips, classes, course registrations, badges that kind of gamify or identify certain skill sets that you can use as prerequisites to take classes or anything like that. All that work that they did, we're able to leverage that. So we got in at a quarter of the price, a fraction of the price to get their base code. And then on top of that, we're actually working with the developers, Jazz Carta and Percolator. The names aren't too critical for you all, but basically we're working with the developers that implemented the website and currently support the website for the Mountaineers. So we gained a lot of efficiencies in our implementation, and our implementation costs are probably coming in at about 2/3 of what they would had we had to develop from scratch. So we got savings by being able to leverage all that work the Mountaineers did. We've got savings on cost from working with the streamlined efficiencies of the developers that are already familiar with the functionality. And then on top of that, anything that we don't get out of this first implementation, we'll be able to track and manage as potential enhancements that we'll be able to partner with the Mountaineers on. And we have an agreement with them where we'll do cost sharing with them of 50% on those enhancements, as long as we agree to it. So we have an option to say, yep, we'll work together on this, have 50% of the cost, or, this is something that we really want as the Colorado Mountain Club, but the Mountaineers just don't see it as that important. They don't have it in the budget. They don't want it. We can still pursue it on our own. So we're not handcuffed to their decision-making. We just have a really good opportunity to share in costs associated with improving or enhancing the website. A really good example of that, as part of this implementation, we're also paralleling an enhancement that the Mountaineers have wanted for a very long time, but we're going to leverage the work we're doing in the implementation, and they're going to cover some of the cost as well. And we're going to get this enhancement with regards to events and ticketing associated with events rolled into the website is just really right off the bat. So that's kind of fantastic, I think. So that's really it for the overview. I'll pause there for a second. If anybody has any questions or wants to chat any further about those items or anything that I might have missed, feel free to chime in. And one thing that's really important as we roll this website out or as we go through this implementation is setting realistic expectations. I really want to emphasize very heavily that we're not going to get everything that everybody wants in this implementation. I've been, since the leadership conference, I've gotten numerous requests for certain things be done. And we're minimizing our customizations from the Mountaineer code for this first phase of the implementation. And so what we have is we're going to build this list out for future enhancements and get back to folks and say, look, this is what we're going to do. This is the timeline of when we might be able to get this incorporated, or even maybe having the hard conversation of that's just not something we're going to be able to implement now, ever, or whatever the conversation happens to be, but we'll have those conversations. But the realistic expectations, where I see the biggest challenges as we look to implement this website, is with data migration is one of them for sure. We're not sure exactly what we'll get. As I said, the current website, the current database has got inconsistent data. It's incomplete in a lot of ways, and it's very manual to manipulate and extract or make things consistent. So we're trying to balance the amount of effort manually that goes into it and time spent that goes into cleaning up a lot of that data and formatting it in a way that we can easily load it into the new database that we're building. With that, I'm certain that there is going to be some information that's lost. I could easily see, history of hikes for somebody, maybe going back 10 years, 15 years, not being available there. I'm not exactly sure that it's available now, but there could be things that are missing on that. One thing that we are focused on with the data migration is that if somebody's completed a course and has a skill set or has a rating for hiking or anything like that, we're going to pull those rosters and get those implemented. Is it going to be perfect? I could pretty much guarantee it's not, but I am confident that we'll get a large majority of, if you've completed a high altitude mountaineering school with the Pikes Peak group, when we roll this over, you will get that badge and it'll be recognized on your profile that says you've got that skill set, you've completed that, and you can pursue whatever activities require that as a prerequisite. I do think we'll probably end up with some questions there. Yeah, go ahead.
I did have one question come in on the chat. Kind of wanted to wait for a break in your talking there, but it kind of fits in a little bit with what you're going through. Joe Price is asking if the site's going to be hosted on the same platform that's hosting the Mountaineers website. And I could see that tying in a little bit with some of the migration.
Yeah, it is. It is not going to be hosted on the same platform we're currently using, but essentially how it's kind of like a layered cake. So we've got the very base of the platform is going to be a Salesforce-based platform. It's going to be based off of nonprofit success program. I might have gotten the last P incorrect, but essentially it's Salesforce nonprofit platform, which is extremely useful. There's a lot of features in there that just come basic, no customizations, that are significant improvements over what we currently operate in the not-for-profit world. And then that's the base layer. On top of that is the Plone, which is an open source code website, essentially. I'm not going to get into technical language on that because I'm not the one to talk that way. But basically the website, the visual, the user experience is going to be Plone based. And that's a really cool web feature. It's the same code that FBI and other high security needs organizations use. So with that, we feel like our security just steps up to a whole nother level. And then if you look at the third layer, it's going to be the top layer, which is essentially that base code from the Mountaineers is laid on top of that, all their customizations. It's going to look a little bit different because we're going to customize it to the Colorado Mountain Club, which includes color, font, language, going from the Mountaineers to Colorado Mountain Club, language like they call their groups branches, we call them groups, things like that. There'll be some differences. And so we'll have some shared code at that level, but we'll also have some individual code, which again, gets back to us not being handcuffed to their decision-making, for us to be able to do what's right for our organization and our membership.
That makes sense, at least as much as my lack of web development goes. Another question did come in though that I think also fits in with the data migration topic. Glenn Barr is asking if the CMC plans to tell folks to quote unquote download their records prior to the switch, in case that's some data that's important to them. Is that something that's being factored in or is a possible recommendation?
Yeah, I take that. I think that's a great recommendation. And I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what's all available. I don't have a long history in my profile, and it's lacking kind of where I'm at. I don't think it's the most up to date. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we need to talk about with folks. But the other thing is it should still be available even after we go live with the new website. So we could still look at opportunities to extract data on a one-off basis. So if somebody doesn't download their information, but they're like, hey, I've got this requirements, we should still be able to access that information and get them updated to the appropriate level or with the appropriate, skills, credentials, whatever else is on there. But with that, we do have a plan to migrate, or we're finalizing out the plan to migrate all the data. It'll be several iterations of migration. So one of the areas that will be kind of a continuous process until we do full cutover is going to be in courses. So there's going to be a time where individuals are signing up for classes that are going to take place after the cutover, the go live. So you might have people enrolling in classes in November, December for classes that are actually going to start in, say, February. Well, if we cut over in January, we'll want to make sure that those rosters are up to date. So we'll constantly, we have the developers working on reloadable uploads essentially so that we can constantly update those rosters appropriately as we go through the process. So we're kind of running in parallel to some extent without putting a huge burden on any one instructor or anybody else to manually transfer data over on a regular basis. Hope that answered your question, Glenn. And thanks for the recommendation. I think that's fantastic. The other area where I've heard some concerns and I'm aware of is the fact that I think about all the groups or most of the groups have separate websites or separate communication tools that allow them to get their information out to their grouping directly. That's all going to be available on the new website. We would love, I think that work that's been done will be heavily leveraged. It's not going to be wasted. I don't want anybody to hear, oh, we're going to force you into this website and everything that you've done previous is going to be thrown out the window. I think all that is really good information. We just need to roll it into the new website. There'll be a different timeline with that. I think that that's going to be something that we can work with each of the groups to say, what is an appropriate timeline to move that over? My hope, and I'm kind of spoiling a little bit later down the road here, but my hope is that we have this website available to groups, volunteer leadership, instructors, a broader swath of our membership, and allow folks to get in there and play with it and maybe build out some of that content within our website, start transferring that over at their own timeline. And I do believe it'll be fairly easy. There'll be some user training and learning that goes along, but I don't think it'll be a huge lift to convert that content over and then even have it potentially ready during go live. Not a requirement. And again, I don't want to come across as us or state or anything mandating certain things in any way. We want to keep a partnership and really make sure that everybody's comfortable moving their stuff over when they're ready. We can do links. I know the Mountaineers have talked about, they have one chapter in their group that in their organization that still 7 years later still does not have their information over to the website and kind of refuses to do so. I've got a feeling we might get a mixed bag of that with the various groups, but I think we can work with that, and it would be great for we'll provide the support to help folks get that stuff over as much as we possibly can and as quickly as we can. But I see that one as being a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I'd have to agree again there, and it looks like some of the audience does too. Greg Long's commenting that he's not aware that the current website has particularly good data on who has passed what classes, and I'm chuckling because I have to agree with that. But is there a plan to obtain any of that data or a way to, I'm not even sure, extract it?
Yeah, and this is where I say with the data migration, not sure what we'll get. I believe the data's in there. Can we get it? What does it look like? And how much time are we going to be spending cleaning that up? Because I'll say, I don't think it's going to be worthwhile to have folks spending a month cleaning up data when we can potentially just rebuild it or go forward from a certain point. But yeah, the intent really is, especially around those course completions or that information hiker ratings, things like that, is to extract that data and have it in a format or organize it into a format that we can load it into the new database and then allow members to get in there and check their profiles and say, hey, we'll have a feedback loop that allows them to say, look, this isn't looking right. I'm not, I should be able to take this, rock anchors course because I did have basic rock climbing, but it's not showing up. I think there's going to be some iterations of that. My hope, though, is that the large majority of the data that's in the system regarding course completion credentials will get into the new website efficiently and correctly.
Okay, so just to kind of put it in my again non-technical parlance, what I'm hearing is reminding me of that showed this old house where they go in and renovate things and they take the wall down, but don't know what they're going to get into until the wall comes down. So well, I guess we'll just have to work with that as we go. Glenn Barr is mentioning the Pikes Peak group doesn't have a separate presence as of now. We're on the current CMC group site, but also that the group education director files could be a good source for some of that information. We do have another question: that is, the state education director have a manual backup of the course completion data? And that's not one I'm sure of.
I don't think we have a manual backup so we back up our database every single night currently on the old website or the outdated website. We do back it up every single night on Amazon AWS software. So it's in the cloud. We do have a nightly backup of the data. How we extract that. And this is where I say also not sure what we get and how much time we have is the consultant that we have that gives us 10 hours a month to work on anything website related. That's a bottleneck. That is the only person that can help us extract this data in a way that's useful, in a way that's efficient without significantly increasing the cost. So we've got them on board, and that's where I don't know what we'll get when we start knocking that wall down. He's going to pull the information. We're going to pull out everything we possibly can. We'll save it, manual files as much as we have, so that we have those records of what we extracted, what we put into the new system, basically what we took out of here and moved over here. But we should always have those previous records, access to the previous database, and be able to pull that information out. And also the thought is to not necessarily keep it in that database. If we're extracting all the data, I'd love to have it available so that we don't need this one person to be able to access it. Or, if we can't, that's not realistic, get them to give us instructions so that Ben, who's on the call, and I'll introduce him in a few minutes, can run through and pull that data, so we can do that internally without relying on one individual. Cool. I'll keep cruising, but throw the questions out, keep jumping in. Don't worry about me pausing for the conversation. I tend to keep talking, so interrupt. Another big one that I see is organizational alignment. This is something we've talked about, trying to go to one CMC. It's been on the agenda. How do you get one CMC without infringing on the autonomy of each of the groups, right? So that's something we're just going to constantly be working through, and it's going to be an evolving process. But consistency and prerequisites in courses, procedures are probably the biggest one, or processes are the biggest ones of, this website isn't going to fix any of that stuff, right? It's going to make the tools available so that we can leverage it once we decide what to do. But this website of the project implementation isn't designed really to address all that. So, I don't want anybody thinking that once we get this website rolled in, we've got one CMC. I could see us having various groups have time getting their web pages adapted over. I know there's going to be struggles across the courses, consistency of saying, the way I do it is the way I'm great. I don't have a problem with it being consistent as long as it's done my way. And so we'll have to work through all that stuff. This website implementation project isn't going to address all of that. We'll try to where we can. We'll identify the places where we think those might be challenges, but I think that's probably going to get pushed to Glenn, your chair of the state council. I could see a lot of that probably getting pushed into there and outside the scope of this project. So really want to set that expectation that this is not going to solve all our problems. I am very excited about this website. I've just played around in the test environment a little bit of it. I've played around in the Mountaineers website, and there are so many things already that we've accomplished in here that are leaps and bounds and generations ahead of where we are with our current site and our current functionality. So I've got a lot of high hopes, but I'm not going to kid myself into thinking it's solving everybody's problem, or even that everybody in the organization is going to be happy with the end result. I know there's going to be things that just aren't addressed, and we'll deal with that. And hopefully with open channels of communication, we'll eventually get folks on board and get the communication across that, what is the appropriate way to handle whatever the issue is. So hopefully I've downplayed, what we're going to get out of this thing. And now for the rest of the presentation, we can talk about getting everybody hyped up and excited for the actual implementation. So
before you get started, Jacob,
yeah, no, you're great. Thank you.
Comment that some messaging, I think, to just general members about what is coming and what is on the back burner could be something to help with expectation management as far as kind of what folks are anticipating from the site.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we've got, and I didn't really address it here, but we do have a communication plan we're working off of. And so we've got a page on the website, cmc.org, in the about drop down that lists kind of updates on where we're at, what we're working on, and where we're moving with the website implementation. And I think you're absolutely right. Taking that repository of requests that may not get implemented with this first phase and communicating out. Here's some great things that we have, giving an opportunity for folks to feedback more in there and build that list up. And then we've got to build out a process for prioritizing those going forward. I know the Mountaineers have a decent process for that. We'll probably steal from them quite a bit, but we do have a plan to meet with them, if not quarterly, at least twice a year, to talk about future enhancements and plan those things out a year or so in advance, so that we're keeping that going. And I think communication associated with that is going to be really key to making sure that people feel heard, that their issues aren't just blowing in the wind or being lost or forgotten. Hey, we hear that you have the issue. And that's where I say is we're going to have that conversation of, this is something we're putting as a future enhancement. This is something that we can't do right now because of whatever limitation that might be dependent on some other future enhancement, or this is something that, hey, we're just not going to go that direction. I'm sorry, but at least having that conversation so people are heard and get a clear message of where we're going with it as we go forward.
Great, thank you.
Sure, yeah. And we'll include updates in the rucksack email. One thing, and I don't know if I was going to talk about it at some point, but one thing is email communications. I think they're going to be significantly improved with this new website, with the new cmc.org. Because right now, one of the limitations that really is kind of disappointing is we currently use my Emma to send out mass emails. And the way it's designed and structured at this point is that if a member decides to opt out of one email, they opt out of everything out of my Emma. So you can't pick and choose which correspondence you want to receive. With the new cmc.org, you'll be able to opt into whatever newsletters, whatever email correspondence you want to get. So it'll allow our members to decide how often they want to get our communications and what communications they're really interested in. So it allows, it's not this all or nothing anymore. And I think that's really exciting from my perspective. Okay, so I'll just kind of move through progress. Again, keep interrupting, I love it. So we're using the Agile process, which essentially you have Agile and you have Waterfall, and Ben's probably cringing as I talk about this because he's really familiar with all of it. But you have this Waterfall process where you kind of design all the requirements for a web platform or an implementation, and you just kind of go down that road and banging your head against the wall every time you run into a hiccup and having to start back over if a new requirement was identified. We're using the Agile process, which allows us, we do what's called iterations, or some people refer to them as sprints. So they're 2 weeks long. The first week is development. At the beginning of that week, we talk about what we're going to work on, what requirements have been developed, and if we need to include anything from a previous sprint or anything like that. The developers then go off and run and start doing the development. We have daily check-ins with them to see how the progress is going and see if they're running into any hiccups, so we can identify and adapt to issues pretty quickly. And then the next week is out for testing. We really haven't had a lot of testing yet out for volunteers and membership, because a lot of these early sprints have been configuration set up, making sure that Plone is talking to Salesforce correctly. We did a lot of work with our e-commerce side of things. So easing the shopping experience, building out almost a customized inventory management system, because our developers are so good at what they do. They were able to do something that's simple and efficient for us, saving us quite a bit of money to try and manage. We have 60 plus titles in our press inventory, and that's a lot to manage. That's a pretty sophisticated publications shop. And right now it's a one-person shop. So trying to ease that and save funds was really critical in that regard. So we've got that. And then security, we're moving to a different third-party administrator for credit card payments. The one we've been using is perfectly fine, fully secured. We have no risk there. We don't store people's credit card information on the site. We'll continue to not store people's credit card information on the site. But stuff will be remembered. So people can do automated renewal. You don't have to go in there and manually go click that button to renew your membership and get frustrated because it doesn't let you do it until the 5th time you try. But so we'll develop things for the first week, and then the second week is testing. A lot of the testing has been internal to staff, conservation, the press department. Sarah's done a lot of the testing on that. Ben's done a lot of testing with configuration and connections. These next few sprints coming up, though, I think is where we're really going to open up to a broader set of testers and the community, a much larger community, to be able to start getting in there and breaking things. So school directors, I imagine they'll have some access to the website shortly and can build out their course content, how it's laid out. We'll provide the structure, just need to fill those buckets in. And I think they'll get to see how easy it is to manage a course in this new web platform versus the old one. So, we're getting better as well. So the developers talk in terms of points, and points translate to hours of work. And so you don't really need to know the details behind it, but basically our first couple iterations, we were averaging about 21 points. So 21 points worth of developer time completion work. Our last couple of sprints, we've been at about 32 points per iteration. So we're really picking up speed. Our developers are getting much more efficient. They typically estimated in the 20s, the low 20s was a typical iteration. So we're above that. They're efficient. We're being efficient. And I expect that to maybe not necessarily continue at that 32 point pace, especially as we pull in more testers, do some more training and things like that. But it's showing that we're working pretty quickly and diligently as we move through the project. So that's really exciting for us. Building out a training program. So Ben and I are working, and actually I might take a moment real quick right now to introduce Ben if you want to jump in real quick. But so Ben Lee is our first ever IT manager, product manager with this web platform. It's a product we're going to have to manage. Ben is from the Pacific Northwest. I messed up last time I introduced him and said he was from California when he's from Oregon. So I think I've got that corrected now, Ben. I apologize again. But so Ben is living in Boulder, I believe, and looking to transfer into Golden. Awesome guy. He's been doing a great job. He jumped into the fire from the frying pan here, and he's not only trying to catch up on what all the groups do, what all the classes mean, all of our acronyms and everything else, but he's also trying to manage this project as well. So getting up to speed and manage the project has been really challenging, but he's been on top of it. And so Ben, I'll turn it over to you for a minute if you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about you, and maybe at least introduce what your jam is in the outdoors, what you're passionate about these days.
Hey everyone, great to virtually meet a lot of you. It's pandemic time, so everyone's accustomed to Zoom, but I hope to someday meet the Pikes people. So basically, again, I'm Ben, and I'm kind of helming this. I'm managing the coordination between the Mountaineers and the developers. Yeah, it's been fantastic. Jacob, let me know if you want me to do the website demo. It's up to you. Basically, I love running and climbing, and I just went backpacking. I mean, really just, but really I love the community building that the CMC does, and I really want to encourage that, which is why stakeholder input and your testing and making sure that I facilitate that communication is really important to me, basically, and really important to this project, because without the groups, without the people, the members, I mean, we're nothing, right? So, yeah.
Awesome, Ben. Thank you. Yeah, Ben got bit by the climbing bug and has been obsessed with it since. So did his first lead, I think, a week or two ago. So good job, Ben. Nice to see you progressing. All right, so then the other things that we've kind of seen in this project so far is, so building out a training program is what we're looking at. We're still working out the details on that, but I think that's to come pretty shortly here. And then there's a conservation data integration. This is pretty cool in that it allows our conservation department to do a much better job of managing their relationships with land managers, National Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, national parks, and really build those relationships and continue that. Even with, we have seasonal staff that rotate every summer as we're building trails and things like that. they'll be able to continue the conversation even with staff turnover or anything of that nature, so that it's a continuity of that conversation and who we're talking to and what conversations have been had with who. So that's going to add a lot more power to our conservation team's ability to build relationships with land managers. So really excited about that. They'll be able to track their progress, grants, things like that much easier as well. So it's going to make their lives a lot more, I guess, add a lot of ease to their lives. I mentioned, the newsletter preferences, members experience, they're going to be able to opt into whatever communications they want to get. So we've worked through that. There's a really, really exciting feature that Ben mentioned to me that we looked at is there's an increased visibility into bills proposed by legislators. So what will happen is our conservation team will be able to see what local legislators are doing in the community for the outdoors and be able to monitor those bills and the progress as they work their way through the legislative process, and really kind of be able to then put out calls to action to our membership to say, hey, if there's something going through that's going to impact how we recreate and how we interact with nature out there, we can more easily identify those, isolate them, and leverage the power of our membership. We're 7,500 members strong. And I think that number is just going to continue to grow. And we have some power. We have a voice in how Colorado's laws are implemented. So, one thing in particular that just is a really good example of that is Julie Mock has a really good relationship with the landowners out at Kite Lake and the Coloradan peaks that have been closed for a few months while we figure out how to best appropriately open those up and make sure that everybody's safe and covered and recreating responsibly out there. So, we've been pretty integrated into that conversation, and I think it's fantastic. So this is just going to take that power to a whole nother level. Ben, I'll let you jump in and see, is there any other exciting things other than e-commerce, which was a big development, or anything else you're seeing that I left off of this?
Yeah. So what I want to say is that a lot of types of things that trip leaders and school directors do is being made configurable. So what that means is all you're going to need is a set of permissions given by me, and then you're going to be able to create the content that you want to in a really easy way. Like, it's just a side menu that you open up and you just fill out basically some fields, and then you're done. Like, I want to make the process of like creating experiences for our members as easy as possible. And you'll see that in testing, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a good point too, is managing rosters, managing trips, managing courses is going to be so much easier for the leaders of those courses. And even so, there's communication options where members on those trips, if they choose to not have their information private, they could connect with other individuals and coordinate carpools very easily. The leader can email the groups very easily. The leader doesn't necessarily have to be involved with screening participants. They can set a set of prerequisites really easily. If those badges are attached, then that person can sign up. If they're not, or that person doesn't meet those prerequisites, they can't even click sign up. It's grayed out and not available to them, and they'd have to reach out to that leader directly and see if they can get an exception or whatever the process might be that's appropriate for that trip leader or that instructor. So, okay. These are slides from the last time I did a presentation. I just felt like I should keep these in here. There are going to be, because I think they're pretty exciting in general, but there are going to be group pages. So Pikes Peak group will have a page that looks similar to this. You'll have a banner picture, whatever you want. You'll have Pikes Peak group, and then you have a little blurb about what it is. In addition to that, the latest updates. So you can have, this page will have information on any events or courses that are coming up specific to the Pikes Peak group. As those things get added to the calendar, so a trip leader puts something on, it'll flow through and connect onto this page. So this page stays fairly up to date without any manual input. So the maintenance associated with these group pages is going to be pretty low. And I anticipate that this would be turned over to the groups to manage. And so you guys can own this. You can put in however you want to put in, organize it, and have whatever information is going to come through. It can also link to things beyond Pikes Peak Group. So if there's some good blogs out there that the Pikes Peak Group wants to share, that you can connect those here as well. And so it's very user friendly, and you're able to get that information out to the Pikes Peak Group members in a condensed format here. And so really excited about those.
Yeah, I think we've got one request, I think, for some consideration as the site's being developed. It looks like for that email functionality that'll go out, there is a stringent request to allow trip leaders or instructors to attach files to the emails to try to simplify some of that. If there's a way to include that functionality as, say, a trip leader's generating an email through the site, I think that's going to be much appreciated.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I'm not too familiar, but I believe that they can attach things, because what you can do is when you set up the course, yeah, Ben, thank you. Perfect. So yes, you should be able to do that, because when you set up the course, it'll have a file structure to it, and one of the files will be contents associated with that course. And so you could email out any prerequisite reading or anything like that to those members, so that you don't have to constantly save them in a file or attach them to emails or anything like that. It should be much more streamlined in communicating those things to folks. So yeah, we'll look at that. I believe that is a capability, and Ben gave the thumbs up on that, so I think we're good there as well. Excellent. This was just one that I personally really like. I think this is cool because it's going to allow us, this new CMC.org is going to allow us, I know this is small, don't worry about reading all of them, but really I just wanted to show the pretty colors and the graphing here. This is going to allow us to give much more real-time information as a staff to the membership base, so that we can be held accountable to the strategic plan goals, trip goals, whatever else is out there that the membership deems is important for us to track and monitor. We'll be able to put that information out there on a very consistent and regular basis. Right now, we've got very manual reports, and I know some things in the past had taken 2-3 months after the fact before information got back to folks, and that's not a great situation for us to be in. So I'm really excited about our ability to communicate things that are going on and changes in the organization on a real-time basis to all our members, and hold us accountable, like I said. So this one I left in because I'm actually pretty excited that we're doing a little bit better. So the estimated timeline, originally when we rolled this out in February, this presentation, we were projected to start in June. We actually were able to start in mid-May. So we got the project rolling a little bit earlier than expected. And right now we're shooting for having this new CMC.org available for launch at the end of this year. So we should, we'll have to figure out what the timing is best. I don't think we want to launch during the Thanksgiving to end of December timeframe with all the holidays, and we really are going to push our annual appeal during that time. So I could see us looking at January, maybe a February launch, but my hope is we could launch in January at the new year, new site, new fun, and really kind of kick off with it. So we're ahead of schedule from this original timeline, and that's really exciting. What that's going to do, though, is that might leave some of that group website conversion stuff out from that January launch, or we might have to really step up our efforts in training users and getting that feedback and getting folks in there and playing with it and breaking it and creating content, things like that, for us to be able to meet that. But we are ahead of this timeline here, and that's pretty exciting. Okay, so what are things looking like so far? Ben, I'll just take it since I'm already sharing the screen. And you can jump in if you think there's anything cool that I missed. But I think I've got to change this up and share something different here. Okay, cool. All right, can I get a thumbs up if you can see the website as it is? Perfect, thank you, Ben. So this is kind of where it's at right now. There's a lot of work still to be done to make this more CMC-ish. For example, I think at the bottom here, it still says Mountaineers. Yeah, so it still has the Mountaineers. So this footer needs to change. And that's stuff that's being worked on this week and next week, I believe, as well, or the next iteration as well. So this is going to look a lot more CMC, Colorado Mountain Club-ish in the coming weeks. But for now, really excited about how this thing is coming along, and a couple of things that I just wanted to show you as I bounce around in here. This admin panel over here to the left will be available if you're an administrator. I'm not exactly sure what level of credentials it would be. You'd probably have some as a course instructor, not exactly sure how far you'd be able to get, but we don't want to give access to folks to be able to just completely reconfigure the entire website. So we've got to figure out what those permissions are and build that out. And that's something that's on Ben's list as well. So you won't see this as an individual signing into the website if you're a general membership or anything like that. This is going to be more in the admin side of things. But what we did try to do is we try to keep this looking very similar to the current Colorado Mountain Club setup, right? With change management, you want to make sure that you minimize the amount of change. There's a lot of change going on here. So we felt if there was things that weren't necessary to change, we didn't change them. So you got the Colorado Mountain Club here, CMC Press, very similar to the current website. Trips, schools and classes. This is where you'll have all the different, items. It'll look very similar to what we have, but these are pretty empty at this point. You can search for trips, but there's none in there at this point, really. So it's pretty empty. We've got to fill this in. That's the big heavy lift, is creating that content, really getting people in there, building out our routes and places, building out our course offerings, building out our trip database, trip bank, all that good stuff. That's going to be a big lift. And so that's where we're going to really reach out to the membership and see what we can do to get folks in there and getting familiar with it. Just kind of a couple of the different pages. You got join the CMC. So now people can select this, get this into a shopping cart. In addition to that, they'll be able to tack on merchandise. If they're interested in buying a shirt and renewing their membership, they can do that in one shopping cart with this new website. Previously, that hasn't been available. You'd have to do your membership on our current website and then go to the merchandise store or the bookstore and do the purchase separately. This is going to ease those transactions and allow people to make purchases much more easily. In addition to that, as people get going on to trips, so they sign up for a trip, it's a trail, whatever it is. When they do that, it'll pop up with some recommendations from CMC Press. Says, hey, this might be a publication that you'd be interested in. You can do recommended readings on courses, but it allow people to say, look, I really liked this trail. I know what book that recommended. I'm going to pick up a copy of that and I'm going to go take all that adventure in that book and go out there and play. Because I think that's something that people can get, is I don't have to necessarily do this trip every time. I can get my own catalog of information and go out and play. So pretty excited about that as well. This groups and sections, this is where obviously the Pikes Peak group would fall into this front range. It's structured just like it is on the website. These are configurable. We can change it if we want, but we felt this was an area we didn't need to make any real major changes on. Yeah, David, looks like you got your hand up.
Hey, while we're on this page, Greg Long asked a question. If you could scroll and where it says schools and classes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so you want me to click it?
It's not well populated yet.
Not at all.
One of our biggest concerns, and Jacob, I spoke to you on the phone or on our Zoom link about this.
Yep.
Is under our current website, CMC. When you go to schools and classes, it gives you all of the Denver offerings. So we got to make sure that we have an architecture where it splits off by group and then by offerings.
Done. You will easily be able to search by group offerings. The Pikes Peak offerings will be here, I believe, from day one. And so we'll just need your help in building that content and putting it out there and making sure that you feel comfortable with it. But absolutely, David, that issue is addressed in this website here. And Pikes Peak courses will get as much love as the Denver group courses on the website. So that is something that I'm very excited about for this.
Yeah, sorry, not to interject, but basically, I don't recall if you actually covered this. There will be robust search functionality as well as the capability for users to really identify which courses within groups are most relevant to them. Like it's actually like the Mountaineers courses will have that. The current version of the Mountaineers website has basically the functionality of what we will have. So I know I can't share the screen right now, but yeah, so it's not built out here, but that whole blue bar is full of the categories, such as like day hiking and trail running, and different types of courses, then like the difficulty of that course, when it's starting, when it's not. You can really customize your search, and this will include obviously the groups. So yeah, it'll try to show you the most relevant stuff.
Thanks, Ben.
One more thing.
Yep.
The trips are actually kind of built out. So if you hover over trips, and then you go to routes and places. Sorry, not trips, but routes and places. And if you click on any of them, actually.
Ben's first free solo. That sounds exciting.
I'm climbing El Cap.
Nice.
So if you scroll down, so this is kind of what a user will see. Actually, once you go back. One thing is I want to show people. Ben, I think it's Ben and Jeff's first CMC route in place. It's there.
Got it.
And then you can see, if you scroll down, cool, upcoming activities. So upcoming instances of that route in place. And then finally, and then a ton of information in a digestible kind of format. But one thing that's really cool is if you click edit, on the admin panel, you can see what it would look like to create and edit a route and or place. So it's the title, summary, and if you click on that blue bar that says default, yeah, you can kind of see that you can customize the categorization, dates, ownership, who can manipulate the content, and finally more advanced settings. And again, so I know this is a whole new interface for a lot of people, but there will be instructionals in terms of in like a written form, as well as I think it's strictly going to be written form with images, but you can always reach out to me.
Yeah, and we'll probably hold some training for any folks, like the first couple groups, and then as much as needed. We're going to be adaptable to this. One thing that I'll say is the trip report function is really cool for the mountaineers. I recently went to climb Olympus in Washington, and I used the Mountaineers trip report, and it was fantastic. It's just so cool. So I'm excited about us being able to put up trip reports for the community to be able to leverage those as well. So yeah, no, that's great, Ben. Thank you for helping with that.
Yeah, Glenn, I think myself as well are really excited about the rich text options, kind of adding emphasis to direct people's attention to kind of the pertinent or important details that we want them to highlight.
Yeah, exactly. And so and then when you set those up, you'll attach to the group, those can link into, I know we don't have any group pages, but it would link into your group. So Pikes Peak group page would have those courses there as well. You can have it listed out, upcoming courses, quick links to those. You can search it. You can customize it, say, I only want to see Pikes Peak group courses. I only want to see these. It's like I said, the overall user experience is incredible here. And I know we're running low on time. I didn't leave a lot of time for questions, so I'm going to jump really quickly. Okay, yeah. So the last thing, just wanted to mention, if you do want to help out, if you want to jump in, if you want to get in early and kind of see this and play with this and see what it's like to build out course content, Glenn, I'm kind of looking at you. I'm sure you're probably interested in that. Reach out, let us know. We'll get you on the list if you're not already on the list, but reach out to Ben. I'll shoot the email over to Joe, so you have both of our email addresses, and then Joe, I guess you could share that with this group as well. But reach out, and really what we're asking for, I think the biggest lift is going to be content creation, getting that stuff out there, getting it robust, doing what we need to do to build it out, and especially from the user perspective, because we can only do so much. I've never set up a trip on CMC, the current website, so I would love to have people that set up trips get in there and say, look, this doesn't work. We need to do something about that. And the agile approach that we're taking would allow us to say, that's an important feature. We're going to roll that into one of these upcoming iterations and be able to get that addressed quickly and then retested, as opposed to having to wait for the end or waiting a year or two to get it in a future enhancement. So with that being said, I don't have really anything else on this. So if there's any questions, I don't mind hanging on a little longer if you'd like, but it's been great question so far.
Hey, Jacob, I'm going to make a comment, if you will. So, and I have a background in higher education. We bought a student information management system. And one of the biggest struggles isn't necessarily the technology, but it's the business rules that you associate. So So I guess the comment I'll make is specifically one of the most important things under this new platform is your badges.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really hard in CMC is screening. You know, who has done what so they could qualify for what courses or for what trips. And, you know, I believe in flat organizations and not, you know, so from a business rule, if you guys are relying on one person up at state to update all those badges, that's probably not very effective.
And we won't.
You know, I can see that as a sticking point. Some people get credit for courses, they get waived, they get,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so there's all kinds of stuff in there. So I guess my question is, where are you guys at on drafting business rules for the basic modules when it's initially released?
Yeah, well, I think we'll come up with, you know, our preliminary ideas for that, but I think it's really going to go out to the groups and say, hey, does this make sense, and get some consensus there? Because again, I don't want it to come down as us dropping a hammer and saying you're forced to do this and it doesn't work for a group. That's not at all what I want. But, you know, to the point about badges, is that's what's really cool about that feature is the instructor on that at the end of the course can assign all those folks with badges at the end. So there is that flexibility. A trip leader could absolutely go in and say, you know what, I'm going to allow this exception and let them in, even if they don't have the badge. So it is going to be dependent on that, which I think you're right. That is going to be critical to a lot of things, right? Can somebody that completed basic rock climbing for the Denver group go on a rock climbing trip for the Pikes Peak group? That's that business rule of, we've got to make sure the groups are willing to accept whatever those minimum standards are and say, yeah, you know what, that's totally fine. So we'll draft something up for that. But I think the challenge is going to be, we're not going to be able to address all circumstances in all areas. And that's where I think the state council can do a lot for this organization there of saying, let's get the groups together. Let's talk about these things. And here's some areas that they've identified in the website. We need some business rules around and can help us with that too. So. But we're early in that, to answer your question, David.
I'll throw in, I get just another thing that I'd like to see is try to clean up from the current website. I do a lot of stuff with adventure travel, and vocabulary is ridiculously important when setting up a class. I just figured out that I called a trip instead of an event. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't see who had paid for it, because trips don't have money associated with them, even though it's a trip. And, you know, I also went through a big thing of, I used to be able to, but now I can't have a trip in which I have both a passcode and require payment. And, you know, when I'm running a hams class, I want to know, or hams trip, I want to know that I've talked to everybody. So that's why I want passcodes. And I mean, seriously, I was on the phone with Roger for an hour. We tried every iteration of, is it an event? Is it a trip? Is it, you know, something else? So I'd like us to simplify our vocabulary. So, you know, if I'm creating a trip, I'm creating a trip. Mm-hmm. If I'm creating a class, I'm creating a class. You know, we've got like 2 different ways we could even label a class. So I'd just like to put in a word for simplification.
Well, I agree with you, Greg. On my side of things, I've seen we have categories for contributions and categories for donations, and they've been used inconsistently across the years, and some of them we don't even use now. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And one thing that I am excited about is I do think we pare down that vocabulary. I think it's trips. I might not get them all right, but it's trips, courses, and then I think we have like seminars, seminar clinic, I think is the 3rd category. So I think we've got that dialed down. The seminar clinics are kind of like those ad hoc quick start seminars, things like that, versus an actual formal course that could,
and social
events. Be offered regularly. And social events. Yeah, so the events, yeah, exactly. I think that would fall into that seminar, clinic, social events. But the great thing is that we'll start with something that's kind of a blank template or those couple items. And we can say, hey, Greg, how does this look? Well, this doesn't work for us. We need one more category. And the great thing is we can add it like that. The flexibility with this website, I can't say enough about how amazing that is compared to what we currently have, where to get what you're talking about, we'd have to go to our consultant that offers us 10 hours a month and see if there's not anything else more critical on that we would need to address. And then maybe it gets pushed 6 months down the road before it's even looked at. So we move away from all of that. And I'm so excited about that. So. Any other questions? I can catch up on chat.
Hey, Jacob, this is Glenn. So as you're looking forward, January, February, whatever the rollout, but you want to build content. So Pikes Peak Group, we just finished our 2022 class calendar. So we know all the dates now, but I don't know that we want to upload them all to the old site if we're going to turn around and do the new site. And I understand the in between. So, we'll probably create a Word document with the schedule. But I think when you're ready and Ben's ready for us to start tearing down your new website and all the wonderful things you think you have, I think that'd be one quick way to get some content up there, and would be quick beta testing for exactly the kinds of things that David Kensley and Greg Long have already mentioned, where, it's an adventure trip, because, part of us are going to have to move from the old way to the new way. And like Greg said, I've been doing the same 5 courses for the last 5 years. And all of a sudden this year, when I copied them, none of them worked. And I think Roger now has me on caller ID for a very good reason.
Glenn, I am so excited to hear that, because I think we're weeks away from opening up and saying, hey, Pikes Peak Group, get in there, build your class content. Here's the training on how to do it. Go through there, see how easy it is, and let's see if we can get it all in there. I think that the cool thing about that is if you do put that in through 2022, we'd want to make sure we don't put like practice data or anything like that. But one thing that's exciting from my perspective is a lot of the content that we build in there, we can just copy paste it into the production when we go live. So you won't have to rebuild all that information. And then we should easily be able to identify, okay, here's our target cutover when this website's going live. Don't put any of these, from these trips on or courses on in the old website, because it's just going to be redundancy and waste of time. I think we can absolutely come to that, and we're weeks away from opening that up for you all to get in there and play around. So very exciting for me to hear that.
All right. Well, thanks everyone who could make it tonight. I think we had a pretty productive discussion, got a bunch of questions answered. And I'm not a web or technical guy, but I'm still excited. I can say it looks pretty so far. We'll see how it all works. But thanks again for your time. I'll get the recording posted up, and then we will proceed from there.
Thank you all. And as always, reach out to myself or Ben. And if you have any other questions, thoughts, functionality you want to add, and we're happy to have the conversation and see if we can figure it out.
Thanks, Jacob and Ben.
Yeah. Thank you all for having us.
Good luck, Dean. Come back from that trip.